Welcome back. You're listening to the discussion Building a Multi-Cloud Strategy for Government, sponsored by VMware on Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guests today are Bill Rowan, the Vice President for Strategic Alliances for Government, Education, and Healthcare at VMware, and Keith Nakasone, a federal strategist also at VMware. Now, before break, both Keith and Bill, you brought up interesting aspects to the multi-cloud journey, this idea of hybrid cloud and multi-cloud. But Bill, I want to start with something you had said earlier in the discussion, which is this idea around workloads. And we heard this a lot earlier on from DoD and other agencies that were like, well, fit for purpose and general purpose, and they had all these different names. But in the end, some workloads run better in Cloud X and some workloads run better in Cloud Y. And I think that is a key piece to making good decisions and being successful in this hybrid cloud environment. Bill, talk a little bit about that workload, that application rationalization piece.
Well, I think that all organizations, when they start to move down their cloud journey, they start to look at, say, what applications are going to work best in which particular cloud environment. And the reality is cloud service providers, like any other technology provider, are constantly trying to improve themselves, whether from a performance standpoint, whether it's from a usability standpoint. So an agency may determine that X application is going to run best in this particular cloud provider. But they need to have the flexibility that a year down the path, another cloud provider may have very well done some innovation that allows that application to run more efficiently someplace else, or at least we should have the flexibility to be able to do that. And so this concept of, yes, for this particular application at this time, here's where I made the decision. That doesn't necessarily mean your customer wants to be locked into that particular provider forever. So what flexibility do we give them? What innovation can we continue to offer them? And a lot of what VMware talks about in terms of portability of any application on any device from running on any particular cloud, that's the foundation of what we believe, is that you should be able to move these things around, not only as you see fit, but as you see innovation continuing to come down the path. And all of the cloud providers are greatly incented to continue to introduce innovation that allows for that type of flexibility.
I want to jump in right before Keith talks a little bit about this. How often do you see that happening, Bill? Because I mean, I can imagine, and I'm guessing here, having never done this, the lift to get to the cloud is not easy, right? There's so much refactoring that has to get done, maybe modernization of an application. And once I'm there, do I really want to then move it again to somebody else? I mean, is that how often do you see that happening? Or
yeah, Jason, it's a fair point. And I think early on in the cloud journey, there was a significant amount of refactoring that was necessary. But that's the beauty of how the marketplace has evolved. So two particular points on that end. One, the ability to move into this common framework across all multiple clouds that VMware provides today from a virtual machine perspective, it simplifies that greatly, gets rid of a lot of that refactoring that was necessary. The second piece is really the innovation that's come around containers, and specifically Kubernetes. VMware has embraced that as well, so that today, whether you create a virtual machine or you create a Kubernetes-based container with VMware, now that container has ultimate portability across all these different clouds. What it also, though, allows us is that we can ensure that we create a standard and consistent security model now, too, across those multiple clouds. We create a similar networking strategy across those clouds. So we're greatly at the same time not only giving ourselves portability, and we're simplifying the operating model at some level, while at the same time enhancing security. We certainly talk a lot about zero trust, but that's the way we get to this next step. So things have greatly changed. They'll continue to innovate, and that's really where we want to be at the heart of this discussion.
Keith, jump in here for a second, because one of the things when you were with GSA and you were working with agencies, were they taking on this idea of, okay, today we'll be in Cloud X, but tomorrow we may want to be in Cloud Y? I mean, did that conversation happen?
Absolutely. And a couple of things that as we were looking at the journey to the cloud, is that from a not only from a technology standpoint, but we had to look at it from an acquisition standpoint as well. As we looked at the acquisitions, we said we have to be a little bit more flexible, as well as have the agility to make changes as we need, as the technology changes. So through that journey, one of the things that we have to look at is, the workforce at large. Are they ready? Are they trained in the DevSecOps environment, right? Developing with the security mindset and then the operational capabilities. So DevSecOps is going to be very important, as well as training the workforce on how to look at things through a different way, meaning the business architecture, the data governance, the data processes, the policies, everything that govern that the structure of building an IT infrastructure is requiring change. So when we look at the technology, it's looking at it from a holistic view of saying what part of the businesses need to change along with the technology to be able to leverage and maximize the efficiencies that technology is building for us.
Now, Bill, Keith just opened up a whole Pandora's box of discussion here around the not just acquisition changes, which we could go down the whole path on, but also the workforce changes. And maybe let me start with that acquisition piece a little bit, and I'll open it to Keith or Bill. Keith, I know that GSA was working on the pay by the drink approach to cloud buying. And I know that memo, I've gotten a couple copies of the drafts, and there's a lot of industry feedback. That's the key here to this really hybrid cloud approach, is the ability to pay by the drink.
Absolutely. And under the multiple awards schedule program under GSA, one of the areas that we focused on was that cloud special item numbers, so that we would be able to deliver capability, as you said, pay by the drink. But that's where industry is moving as well, right? So as we migrate and change the dynamics, the budget, the acquisition process, everything has to fall in line. So from a thought leadership perspective, a lot of that CXO, the financial, the acquisition, and the CIOs, they have to get together and have those meaningful discussions so that they'll be aligned as they move forward. And so from a workforce perspective and from the business processes, everything has to be looked at. And one of the key things that what we're aware of is that organizational change, but also the workforce at large, because the way we would develop applications and IT modernization moving forward wouldn't be the same way as the way we develop legacy systems.
Bill, when you talk to your agency customers, and this idea of the workforce challenge and or the procurement challenge, how often does that come up versus, well, which cloud do we go to, and what type of cloud is best? I mean, where are these conversations that you're seeing?
Well, in my 30 plus years of doing IT in the federal government, it seems like procurement's always been an issue. So I don't see that one as a new one or going away. I think customers are becoming more sophisticated, not just in government, but in enterprises across the board. I think that organizations understand that in this particular model, I should pay for those services just when I'm using them. And when I'm not using them, much like the analogy of turning off the electricity or turning off the lights when you leave a room, it's the same concept. When I'm not using these systems, I should have the ability to turn them off and stop the clock in terms of what I'm paying for. Now, it's a great approach. It's not usually really simplistic to implement that, because you need an additional other types of changes in the workforce so that your workforce understands when I'm not using the application, I need to turn the application off so that I stop. So there's a two-part issue there. I think that the interesting piece is that now today we're seeing a workforce, not just in government, but across enterprises, that are constantly looking for that next innovation. And the fact that the cloud provides, and cloud service providers provide them a marketplace of different tools and different systems that allow for continuous innovation, I think that's the really exciting part. It's not just the fact that we've built these clouds and we're spending less for infrastructure service, but we're allowing constant innovation along the line as well. And that constant innovation, that constant looking for ways to provide greater agility and more flexibility and speed to mission for the constituents of which they serve, That's the really exciting part. And that's where I see the workforce of the government being just as innovative as any enterprise out there in the United States.
Bill, you brought up this idea of continuous innovation, and I think that's one of the things that people maybe overlook when it comes to this multi-cloud hybrid approach. You could use something that's on premise and say, hey, if we put this in the cloud, we can 10x this. But we can also then, as things aren't needed as much, bring it back on prem. You can go back and forth. You brought up Kubernetes earlier. You brought up containerization. I think those are some of those innovations that are coming. Is that where agencies are going next? Again, I'll go back to the question is, what do you see from your government customers? And Keith can weigh in here. When he was in government, and now that he's on the other side, so to speak, what's the conversations around how do we take advantage of those innovations and become more innovative?
Well, so it's interesting. And here's another place where, sometimes the Department of Defense maybe doesn't get the proper kudos it deserves. If you go back a number of years ago and look at what happened at Kessel Run within the Air Force and how their software factory innovated a lot of speed to mission and cost savings along the way for that constant innovation of the application piece, we've seen that replay itself again within U.S. Space Command at Kobayashi Maru. Again, that constant innovation, and most recently with what's been done with U.S. Army Futures Command and their software factory. Again, taking the soldier, putting them in place to help them drive that constant innovation for an application. Those are the things that we find very interesting, very exciting, and clearly become a part of the JWCC strategy that DoD is trying to move towards with its cloud. How do they harness that innovation? How is that innovation shared across the board at DoD so that other organizations can take advantage of the same sort of skill sets and flexibility and agility that those organizations are driving? And I think that if the average citizen stepped back and looked at what was happening, they would be so very proud of what their government is doing on a regular basis that is going to ultimately protect soldiers and save lives. And I think that's a real something that we can all be very, very proud of, that cloud is playing a major portion in.
Keith, we got about 30 seconds left in our conversation. Quickly, give me either react to what Bill said or give me maybe a summation of the big takeaway from our conversation today.
Yeah, Bill's absolutely correct. So, number one thing that we need to do is look at this as an organizational change, that we have to look at the whole ecosystem in order to make this happen. And I think, as we move forward, to move acquisitions along, we're going to have to be a little bit more flexible, agile, and not be 100% prescriptive, but have a little bit more agility within the construct of acquisitions.
Tell me what problem to solve, not how to solve the problem. It's the old challenge of acquisition. Gentlemen, I very much appreciate your time today, but unfortunately we are out of time. So let me thank my guests. Bill Rowan, the Vice President for Strategic Alliances for Government, Education, and Healthcare at VMware, and Keith Nakasone, a Federal Strategist at VMware. I'm Jason Miller, and you've been listening to the discussion, Building a Multi-Cloud Strategy for Government, sponsored by VMware on Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search VMware.